So as far as you can remember, you like the taste of black coffee.
I did. Yeah.
I would see that surprises me because even me, like I like black coffee. I get disgusting black coffee now. Like when I mean what I mean by that is like I get like an iced cold brew from Starbucks with a shot, like an extra shot black, just like it's like licking a battery.
Okay.
And I drink that and I'm like, tasty. Like
Okay.
the first sip is the one that makes you go, oh.
Okay.
But then the rest of it's fine.
Enough of your palate's dead that you
then
can
I'm
drink
good.
it. Okay.
Yeah. But it took me a long time to get there. When I first started drinking black coffee, I was like, who does this and why? Like, you should not be. This should be illegal. This is gross.
Well,
Depends on the coffee. I learned that.
It does depend on the coffee, and there's a lot of things that people, and this is something that I've been discussing with, especially folks come to the workshops and those kinds of things. And we have time to have these conversations, is that most people's experience with coffee is they either drink it the way that they were introduced to it by a parent or a grandparent, and a lot of times loaded with cream or sugar or whatever else.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what they think it's supposed to be. Or they tried it later in college, trying to stay up, real late. So it was very poorly made coffee, and they tried to drink it and it was too hot and it blew out the palate. And so when something's too hot and it blows out your palate, you can't really taste anything for a period of time anyway. So then all you're getting, even after it cools down, is any lingering bitterness or acridness that's there. So I really encourage people, like whenever you try a new coffee or try coffee, period, pour it, brew it, obviously, pour it, let it cool off enough, ideally probably in the low to mid 140s, 100, if you're looking for a temperature guide, and start sipping on it. And, just like drinking wine or, some of the crap, aspirate it, let it go over your palate and say, okay, what flavors are there? Before you start adding stuff to it to see, is this coffee, are the flavors that are there enjoyable or not? If they're not, then you can start sort of doing that sort of homogeneous beverage where everything tastes like cream and sugar.
Do you do that with every time you get a new coffee, or you let me see how this is? I mean, because to me it sounds like you treat coffee as if as I would treat that's a fun sounding cheese that I'd like for a sandwich or something. Like, and I'm grocery shopping, I
Right.
get it.
Right.
I try it. I'm like, that'd be good with turkey.
Okay. Yeah.
And
cheese and meat pairings. That's
right,
completely,
what I'm saying is I've never thought of coffee that way. I'm just like, I like this one. I don't know.
It's like, for a lot of people, it's a caffeine delivery device. It becomes something.
That's all it is for me.
Right. And they're looking for, and if that's what it is, then really what's your next biggest component, as long as it's delivering the caffeine, is you want convenience. You don't want to have to actually put any effort to crafting something that's going to be, because you don't really care. I mean, it's just.
I do. There are times where it's not just about that.
Okay.
But those are pretty rare.
Well,
if I'm honest.
When the thing is, and that's what we have a lot of people that talk about their weekend coffee, like during the week when they're trying to get out the door, when it's, expediency becomes the driver of whatever it is they're doing in the morning, they need to have, whether it's that K-Cup or some type of pod brewer or something that's, more efficient than taking 15, 20 minutes to do a Chemex pour over, or a 10-minute French press or something. A lot of it has to do with, where their priorities are in that consumption of that beverage.
Mm-hmm.
And, but coffees very much are, like you're saying, a cheese may go with a meat, whatever, on that sandwich may be really good. But the fact that usually I evaluate coffees in the light to medium roast range, because once you go to a certain point in the roast process, you start really blowing out the more subtle notes that may make it unique to that particular origin, or that particular varietal from that particular origin. Especially some of the floral notes, some of the fruity notes can really kind of change if they're there.
You're almost burning it.
Well,
I'm saying almost burning it because I'm trying to put it in words that's
Yeah, the things that happen with roasting coffee, just like cooking in general, the Maillard reactions, those kinds of things, they happen on a little bit different scale because, like so much of food and beverage in general, there's a lot of chemical compounds. There's hundreds of these things that kind of create whatever that the aroma, the flavor, the things that are there that actually end up in the cup and give it a profile for you to either like it or not like it. So yes, the further you go in the roast, it was called a roast curve. So you're roasting coffees, and it goes through a drying phase where you're sort of kind of the moisture is kind of coming out of the seed, because it's really the seed of the coffee cherry. It's not a bean, but so what you're doing is so much of that the energy from your roaster, the heat energy from like I use a drum roaster, which sort of is tumbling, kind of like a dryer. You think of it that way. So that heat energy being endothermic in the sense that the seed or the bean is absorbing the heat, and so it's internalizing the heat. So it's endothermic, and then at a certain point, the roast it becomes exothermic, and so the heat starts pushing outward. And so when a roast is done, you get what's called a lighter roast, which you hear it sounds like a crack. So sounds not dissimilar to popcorn. So what's happening is between the times that first crack starts and you then you'll have a lull between the first crack and then a secondary, really, which sounds more like a snap, which is a higher pitched sound. You have this kind of developmental phase. So your dry phase ends sort of when there's no green left on the seed, the bean at all. It's kind of a uniform tan color, starts to smell almost like fresh cut hay, then getting into bread baking kind of thing. So you're using sight, smell, and sound kind of all in this process. But you're developing this roast, whatever, because the beans have different densities. Higher elevation, slower growing beans tend to have a denser cellular structure, so they're going to roast differently than a lower elevation, softer bean. So that's a lot of that's the science that goes into how when you're learning to do this stuff, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but then you're trying to find the best approach to roast any individual coffee, because even things like how it's processed, dry or natural process versus washed versus what's called a honey processed, those things impact how you approach that roast as well. And so when I'm roasting and evaluating the coffees, to go back to your question, I tend to do it at that light to medium roast so that I can see what the full flavor profile is before I get into a darker roast profile, to where a lot of that stuff's been really eliminated, and so you're starting to taste more of a roasty note. So you sort of have this undertone of almost like that smokiness across. It doesn't matter almost the origin of the bean strip, but you're still going to get kind of a chocolate note. You can get some sweetness. Sometimes you develop some sweetness, but it's a fine line when you get into that snap of taking it too far, and you get into what some of these other big name companies we talked about, qualify some of those roasts. But part of why some of them do that is just for some homogeneousness of flavor, so that they can have a consistent cup time after time after time, because coffee's a crop, just like grapes for wine and everything else. They'll change just because you had that particular origin from that particular region before. The next year it may be a little bit different, because it could have been a wetter season, it could have been a drier season. A lot of those things will change year to year. And so when you work on these sort of single origin coffees like I do, in addition to blends and stuff that we do for coffee shops and those kinds of things that, they want a repeatable, espresso profile or drip coffee profile. But that's where people that are really into coffee and like specialty coffee, they want some change, some transition. They usually don't want the same thing every time.
Hey there, hope you enjoyed that clip. You can find more clips like this and full video episodes of the Small Stuff Podcast on our YouTube channel. You can also listen to full episodes of the Small Stuff Podcast in audio form wherever it is you get your podcasts: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, all the places. Also, follow us on social media. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. All the links are in the description. Have a nice day.